President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president, and what Mr. Trump left me. We brought a kitchen table. If the things weren't able to be met during the month, it was a problem. Sure, we built 2 million new units. If you had to take a look at all the drugs they can include beginning, and the fact of the matter is that I'm the only president this century that doesn't have any this decade. What I'm going to do, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 million, billion dollars, I should say, making sure that we continue to strengthen our eligible for what I've been able to do with the the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
The fact is that the vast majority, and the states should be able to have it. We're in a state, doctor, have him decide on. There's so many young women who have been, including a young woman who just was murdered, and he went to the funeral. She was murdered by an immigrant coming in. They talk about that, but here's the deal: there's a lot of young women who are being raped by their in-laws, by their spouses, brothers and sisters. It's just ridiculous, and they can do nothing about it. And they try to arrest them when they cross state lines.
Thank you.
Second time is between the doctor and an extreme situation. The third time is between the doctor. Between the woman and the state. The idea that the politicians. That the founders wanted the politicians to be the ones making decisions about women's health is ridiculous. That's the last. No politician should be making that decision. What's he going to do? What's he going to do? In fact, if the MAGA Republicans, he gets elected, all of that, made sure that we are in a situation, number of border police, there are babies from their mothers, making sure they were in the family. What's happened? Total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
Came along and killed under his administration, killed an Al-Qaeda person come in his administration, killed 3 American soldiers. That's the only terrorist that's there. I'm not saying that no terrorist ever got through, but the idea, veterans are a hell of a lot better off since I passed the PACT Act. 1 million of them now have insurance, and their families have it. Their families have it because what happened, whether it was Agent Orange or burn pits, they're all being covered now. And his group opposed that. We're also in a situation where we have great respect for veterans. My son spent a year in Iraq, living next to one of those burn pits, came back with stage 4 glioblastoma. I was recently in France for D-Day, and I spoke all about those heroes that died. I went to the World War I cemetery he refused to go to. He was standing with his 4-star general, and he told me, he said, I don't want to go in there because they're a bunch of losers and suckers. The president has in American history. And they now are in their family. The only sacred obligation we have as a country is to care for our veterans when they come home, cause brain damage. This guy told Trump, do whatever you want, and do whatever you want. And that's exactly what Trump did to Putin, encourage him.
President Biden, you have a minute.
Think happens to Poland? What do you think of Belarus? And so if you want a war, you ought to find out what he's going to do, because if in fact he does what he says and walks away, and by the way, that's why we're strong. Number one, everyone from the United Nations Security Council endorsed the plan I put forward. The third phase is the end of the war. And when they had a full-blown intercontinental ballistic missile attack on Israel, no one was hurt, No, one Israeli was accidentally killed, and it just stopped. We saved Israel. We are the biggest producer of support for Israel of anyone in the world. And so there are two different things. Hamas cannot be allowed to be continued. We continue to send our experts and our intelligence people as to how they can get Hamas like we did bin Laden. You don't have to do it. And by the way, they've been greatly weakened, Hamas, greatly weakened, and they should be. They should be eliminated. But you've got to be careful for using certain weapons among population centers.
Just going back to you.
It may be a big ocean, but were we ever able to avoid a war in Europe, a major war in Europe? What happens if, in fact, you have Putin continue to go into NATO? We have an Article 5 agreement. See what happens then. That no major. Look, he encouraged those folks to go up on Capitol Hill. Number one, watching, begging, being begged. Talked about these people being patriots and great patrons of America, and they said, no, this guy is responsible for doing what was done. Come on. When I asked him the first two debates we had, first time around, I said, will you denounce the Proud Boys? He said, no, I'll tell them to stand by. The idea he's refusing, will you denounce these guys? Will you denounce the people we're talking about now? Will you denounce the people who attacked that Capitol? What are you going to do?
I'm going to give you a.
I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat. But I do know he has a real problem. And so the fact that, could you ever think you heard any president say, I decided in Iraq, because of Iraq, I set up on torches, and people coming out of that forest, carrying those woods, carrying those torches. We saw people occupying his own vice president. Look, there's a reason why 40. Number two, the wages of black unemployment. Number three, we're providing housing for black Americans and dealing with the segregation that exists among these corporations that collude to keep people out of their houses. And in addition to that, we find that the impact on the choice that black families have to make relative to child care is incredibly difficult. You increase economic growth, who had to take out student loans that were ballooning, that if they were engaged in nursing, and anything having to do with volunteerism, if they paid their bills for 10 years. The idea that we're not doing anything, we're providing for equity, and there's a lot going on. But in inflation, he caused it by his tremendous malfeasance in the way. I don't know where the hell he's been. Change legislation in history. We find ourselves, and by the way, black colleges. I came up with $15 billion for HBCUs, historic black universities and colleges, because they don't have the kind of contributors that they have to build these laboratories and the like. Any black student is capable in college of doing any white student can do. They just don't have the money, but now they'll be able to get those jobs in high tech. We're in a situation where the idea that he is claiming to have done something that had the cleanest water, he hadn't done a damn thing for the environment. He pulled out of the Paris Peace Accord, Climate Accord. I immediately joined it because if we reach 1.5 degrees Celsius at any one point, there's no way back. The only existential. The idea is that we, in fact, we were the only ones of consequence who were not members of the Paris Accord. How can we do anything if we're not able to? The United States can't get its pollution under control. One of the largest polluters in the world, number one. We set up a climate corps for thousands of young people to learn how to deal with climate, just like the Peace Corps. And we're moving into every company in the world, every pharmaceutical company cannot have to pay.
Thank you.
And by the way, right now, from the time the first one they get when they're 18 years old, the idea that they're going to, I've been proposing that everybody, the millionaires pay 1%. So no one I would not raise the cost of Social Security for anybody. And by the way, and on the ACA, as I said, you're in a circumstance where 400,000 people, 40 million people, he just doesn't know what he's talking about. I told you before. And by the way, when I said suckers and losers, he acknowledged after that he fired that general. That general got fired because he's the one that acknowledged that that's what he said. He was the one standing with Trump when he said it, number one. Number two, the idea that we're going to be in a situation where all these millions and millions, the way he talks about it, illegal aliens are coming into the country and taking away our jobs. There's a reason why we have the fastest growing economy in the world, the reason why we have the most successful economy in the world. We're doing better than any other nation in the world. And by the way, those 15 Nobel laureates he talked about being phony, those 15 Nobel laureates, economists, they all said that if Trump is reelected, we're likely to have a recession and inflation is going to increasingly go up. And by the way, worst president in history, 159 presidential scholars voted him the worst president in the history of the United States of America.
President Biden, thank you so much. Let's turn to the cost of child care, which many American families struggle to afford. President Trump, both you and President Biden have tried to address this issue, but the average cost of child care in this country has risen to more than $11,000 a year per child. For many families, the cost of child care for 2 children is more than their rent. In your second term, what would you do to make child care more affordable?
Just to go back, the general got fired because he was no good. And if he said that, that's why he made it up. But we have 19 people that said I didn't say it, and they're very highly respected, much more so than him. The other thing is, he doesn't fire people. He never fired people. I've never seen him fire anybody. I did fire a lot. I fired Comey because he was no good. I fired a lot of the top people at the FBI, drained the swamp. They were no good. Not easy to fire people. You'd pay a price for it, but they were no good. I inherited these people. I didn't put them there. I didn't put Comey there. He was no good. I fired him. This guy hasn't fired anybody. He never fires. He should have fired every military man that was involved with that the Afghanistan horror show, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. He didn't fire. Did you fire anybody? Did you fire anybody that's on the border that's allowed us to have the worst border in the history of the world? Did anybody get fired for allowing 18 million people, many from prisons, many from mental institutions? Did you fire anybody that allowed our country to be destroyed? Joe, our country is being destroyed as you and I sit up here and waste a lot of time on this debate. This shouldn't be a debate. He is the worst president. He just said about me because I said it. But look, he's the worst president in the history of our country. He's destroyed our country. Now, all of a sudden, he's trying to get a little tough on the border. He came out with a nothing deal, and it reduced it a little bit, like this much. It's insignificant. He wants open borders. He wants our country to either be destroyed or he wants to pick up those people as voters. And I don't think we just can't let it happen. If he wins this election, our country doesn't have a chance, not even a chance, of coming out of this rut. We probably won't have a country left anymore. That's how bad it is. He is the worst in history by far.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden?
We are the most admired country in the world. We're the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity. We have the finest military in the history of the world, the finest in the history of the world. No one thinks we're weak. No one wants to screw around with us. Nobody, number one. Number two, the idea that we're talking about worst presidents. I wasn't joking. Look it up. Go online. 159 or 58, don't hold me wrong about. He's increased the tariff. He will increase the, and all the things that are very important. How he has not raised, he somehow, you have not, in fact, made any contact, this guy's 3 years younger and a lot less competent. Over billions of dollars. And by the way, we brought an awful lot of people, the whole idea of computer chips. And they're, guess what? Those fabs, they call to build these chips. Those fabs pay, and those who he coddles up to from.
Thank you. President Biden?
You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds, or 235 pounds. Well, you said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway, that's what you're. Anyway, just take a look at what he says he is, and take a look at what he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf with you if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie that he's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8. But I have, you know how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Okay, let's
you know,
not
you know how
act
many
like
rounds-
children.
President Trump,
You want a World War III, let him follow and win, and let put your leader in the world who wouldn't trade places with the job I've done and what they've done. What I did, when, for example, he wants to get rid of the ability of Medicare we got it down to $35. That reduced the federal debt all along, and it's happening now. I'm going to make sure we do something about what we're doing on lead pipes and all the things.